Regardless of the sport, all children go through three phases in skill acquisition. This three-phase process we call the learning process. Understanding each of these phases is vital in the proper formation of young players. The first phase is the exposure phase. During this phase, players are exposed to all the concepts, ideas, and behaviors on how to play the game. The source for exposure to game concepts can be various. The main one will be during your practices, but be aware that children can also pick up ideas of how to play the game from watching professional games and playing with friends and family. Your training sessions need to be well designed in order to create the proper learning environment. The next phase is the assimilation phase. During this phase, players begin to display the skills being taught during practices. How fast children assimilate skills differ from child to child. Keep in mind that children learn at different rates. Finally, we move on the next phase, which is the transfer phase. Now players begin to display the skills during match conditions. In some cases, the skill may show up sporadically until eventually it is consistently being displayed during matches. Once this occurs, we say that the skill has been successfully transferred. If your players are not transferring skills into match conditions, then you must review your training program and make modifications. When players are not transferring skills, it is not because they lack the capacity to do so. It is because the learning environment is deficient. Later in this course, you will learn how to choose the proper activities that will maximize skill transferability. All training activities that we can use during a training session fall within a spectrum of non-contextual and contextual activities. This spectrum is called the principle of specificity. The principle of specificity states that training activities that closely resemble the game will be easier to assimilate and transfer to match conditions. The goal of all training activities should always be the transferability of skills. Exposing our young players to contextual activities will ensure they learn to play the game more efficiently. One of the goals of designing training programs is for our young players to develop the physical musculature required to play the sport. The specific adaptation to imposed demands states that the physiological adaptation an athlete makes depends on the stimulus he receives during training. The easiest way to understand this principle is by comparing the adaptation to training of marathon runners, a long-distance event, aerobic in nature, and 100-meter sprinters, a short-distance event, explosive and anaerobic in nature. Look at the difference in the physical adaptation their training has had on their bodies. They are basically on opposite ends. Soccer is a sport that requires a mix of these extremes. We need players that have the endurance of marathon runners, but also the explosiveness of the sprinter. By carefully selecting training activities, we can ensure that long-term, our young players will develop correctly from a physiological standpoint that will allow them to play the game at high intensities.